What if every pager in a country suddenly turned into a weapon, and no one knew who pulled the trigger? In a plain, concrete room outside Tel Aviv, a man who never fired a shot in his life sat staring at a pager the size of his palm. His name was Yaron Keshet, an electrical engineer from Haifa, drafted months ago into a project that didn't officially exist. On the surface, he built innocuous telecommunications devices. In truth, he was attempting the most synchronized sabotage operation Israel had ever conceived, an operation that demanded silence, invisibility, and timing so precise that even a single early signal could burn the entire network. He wasn't a spy, not really. He was a circuit designer. Yet here he was, surrounded by maps of southern Lebanon, labeled with red blotches representing thousands of identical devices already moving across borders under fake import manifests. Each one, a node in a plan no one outside this room understood in full. Yaron's job was simple only on paper: make them talk when told, and never before. But he knew circuits had personalities, unpredictable quirks when exposed to heat, humidity, or human hands that didn't follow instructions. And 3,000 of them now sat in pockets, shops, and vehicles controlled by an enemy known for catching ghosts. There were two risks that haunted him even before the operation began. The first was premature activation, a single voltage mismatch triggering a local explosion before the others were ready. That would expose the entire operation, naming the pagers as foreign sabotage devices. The second was remote detection. Hezbollah had begun quietly auditing their communications supply chains, tracing electromagnetic signatures that didn't belong. If any technician disassembled a wrong unit and matched the unusual capacitors Yaron designed, the cover story would collapse instantly. He didn't tell headquarters about a third danger, a flaw he had discovered himself in the encryption sequence. Each device carried an identification hash slightly cleaner than Hezbollah's old analog systems. It was supposed to ensure precision, but that Polish could betray them. An enemy system might recognize the too-perfect pattern and start filtering for it. He thought he could fix it later, once testing wrapped. He never told anyone because the schedule never allowed later. Now, the crates were gone, the pagers distributed, and his correction remained undone. Somewhere across the border, a truck bearing counterfeit Czech import papers rattled along a mountain highway toward Tyre. Inside, 6 boxes of Yaron's devices swayed gently under a tarpaulin beside car bearings and electrical fuses. One customs officer, rumored to work part-time for a Hezbollah logistics contractor, was supervising that shipment. One wrong glance, one wrong question, and months of planning would implode. Back in the operations wing, Yaron's superior, Oren, checked for incoming reports. Oren had served countless covert assignments across Eastern Europe, but this one was different. He had no agents in the field to pull out if something went wrong, no safe routes for recovery. The risk was locked inside civilian pocket devices scattered across hostile territory. Control existed only until the first local noticed too many of the same model appearing in too few hands. Oren didn't share Yaron's engineer's nervousness. To him, numbers meant confidence. 3,000 pagers represented reach, precision, plausible deniability. If one fails, he told Yaron, it's static, noise, forgettable. Yaron tried to believe him, but static accumulates. Each day, telemetry streams arrived coded in series of beeps and hexadecimal bursts. Each one confirmed a successful signal reflection, meaning the pager's internal chip had survived shipment and install. But one feed, nicknamed Sector 9, began returning partial data, truncated pulses, as though something was blocking transmission. Yaron flagged it twice, but Oren dismissed it. Maybe mountains, maybe interference. Our window's good. It was the kind of dismissal that haunted Yaron's nights. Interference was rarely random. Either the pagers were dead, or someone had started probing their frequencies. He waited 2 more days before acting on instinct. He built a simulation, thousands of virtual pagers inside his workstation, and fed them randomized interference signals to mimic Lebanese topography. The results didn't match. The real pagers weren't silent from terrain blockage. They were being queried. Someone, somewhere, was pinging the devices and recording their responses. He stared at the pattern. The query pulses came every 9 minutes. Too regular for chance, too calculated for curiosity. Hezbollah didn't yet know what the devices were, but clearly they had noticed something different in their supply chain. Yaron wanted to alert command immediately, but his access level wasn't high enough to transmit direct warnings. Every alert request required Oren's clearance, and Oren wasn't in the building. So he waited, angry, pacing, imagining the unseen fingerprints flicking through the wires of his design on the other side of the border. Hours later, headquarters ordered a temporary communications freeze. All outgoing systems, satellites, radio relays, fiber links, paused. No explanation came. Yaron assumed it was routine maintenance. It wasn't. Somewhere in the logistics chain, a port-side informant had vanished. The last checkpoint his badge recorded was at an electrical substation outside Sidon, a known Hezbollah procurement site. Whether he was detained, compromised, or fled, no one knew. What mattered was that he carried internal serial mappings for the shipment manifests. The first half of the import codes were harmless. The second half correlated to digital activation timing. If those codes surfaced, Hezbollah's analysts could track which devices belonged to which batches, narrowing their search. Yaron didn't sleep that night. For the first time, he realized the danger wasn't just operational, it was personal. His encryption flaw, left inside the pagers for convenience, might be the one signature that tied the entire project to its origin. If detected, it wasn't the pagers that would be hunted next, it would be the engineers who wrote their language. By morning, reports from field channels indicated the entire distribution had completed. The system was live, but fragile. No one knew which pagers Hezbollah might have tested or tracked. And Yaron, staring again at that single sample on his desk, kept asking himself a question he couldn't stop circling back to. Had someone already found the pattern, and were they keeping silent, waiting for him to make the next move? The first assumption to break came quietly. Oren returned from a 48-hour absence expecting stability, pagers in place, telemetry solid, field chatter routine. But the console told a different story. Sector 9, the same cluster Yaron had flagged earlier, no longer transmitted anomalies. Instead, it transmitted nothing. Not silence coded as static. Actual, measurable absence. 300 pagers vanished from system reflection overnight. No burn signals, no overload reports, simply missing. Oren stared at the blank readings too long before calling Yaron in. Yaron's throat tightened. For weeks, he had begged for diagnostic time. Now it was too late. The short-wave relays dropped synchronization, he said cautiously. Dropped, Oren repeated. Yes. As in, someone cloned the frequency and reprogrammed the handshake. The word cloned landed like broken glass on the floor. Reprogramming shouldn't have been possible. The encryption lock was hardware fused. Unless, of course, someone had physically opened the devices, studied the circuit pattern, and reconstructed the key. That would take experts and time, which meant Hezbollah had been probing their comms far longer than Israel believed. Oren didn't show it, but panic crept beneath his measured silence. If the pagers were being reverse-engineered, every untriggered unit still in Lebanon was a potential intelligence beacon. It could announce Israel's involvement long before anyone pressed the activation sequence. The room swelled with heat from the network consoles. Yaron wanted to say the words forming in his chest. I told you this could happen, but bit them back. Arguing now would achieve nothing. Instead, he spoke the other truth. The more they query those chips, the closer they'll get to the checksum pattern. My encryption signature. If they match that, they'll link it to known Israeli code architecture. Oren's expression hardly moved. He already knew. Do we abort? Yaron asked. Oren looked at the clock. Abort meant writing off 2 years of infiltration, millions in logistics, and the chance that Hezbollah would figure out the mod architecture anyway. Abort needs proof, he said finally, not anxiety. The proof arrived 12 hours later. A sudden noise spike lit the telemetry panel. Broadband pings hitting every channel simultaneously from 3 separate nodes. To a trained eye, it wasn't random scanning, it was mapping. Hezbollah was digitally triangulating active devices, building a network signature. Yaron's voice cracked for the first time. They're fingerprinting us. It was too fast for command approval. Oren disconnected from headquarters and cut to local control. The last standing option was an emergency purge, an electromagnetic command that would overheat every device's power cell, destroying the encryption fragment but leaving the physical frame intact. It wasn't detonation, just neutralization. He entered the purge code halfway through, then froze. If the signal failed mid-sequence, it would do the opposite. Lock the encryption into readout mode and hand Hezbollah a digital map of the entire array. The operation would dissolve in one push. He erased the command. "No purge," he whispered. "We need authorization." This was the first real fracture between them. Yaren paced. "We don't need authorization. If they break those chips, they'll—" "Enough," Oren snapped. "We wait." Waiting had consequences. By dawn, new anomalies populated the board, not missing devices this time, but mirrored echoes. Someone was sending back ghost signals, pretending to be Mossad units, filling telemetry with fake confirmations. It took Yaren hours to separate truth from forgery. Every validation ping could now be both ally or enemy, original or imitation. The network was polluted. Inside HQ, Command held a crisis meeting. 50 analysts circled the problem without agreeing on root cause. Some argued for preemptive activation, trigger the operation before more systems went dark. Others warned that one wrong frequency coil could send pagers detonating in random clusters. Lebanon's civilian casualty count would skyrocket. Yaren wasn't invited to the meeting, but he overheard fragments through the thin walls. Words like containment, deniability, collateral imagery management. Nowhere did anyone mention technical liability, his liability. Oren finally returned, face drawn, tension in every syllable. HQ wants a 72-hour review. They'll decide after that. It'll be too late in 72 hours, Yaren said quietly. By then, the encryption fingerprint will be everywhere. Oren didn't answer. He lifted the glass tablet displaying the real-time logs, stared at the flickering data stream, then turned it off. "You'll keep this between us." Meaning the missing units. Meaning the clone signature. Meaning that hundreds of compromised pagers were already acting as Hezbollah's unknowing sensors. Yaren felt the ground tilt under him. "You can't bury this." "You'll do your job," Oren said. "We finished the calibration review. That's all that matters right now." He left the room before Yaren could argue further. The door closed like a verdict. That night, Yaren accessed the secure archive, not to adjust parameters but to trace the power curve anomalies for corroboration. What he found wasn't what he expected. Every missing pager in Sector 9 was still alive. Alive, but idle. Not destroyed, not reprogrammed. They were sitting in silent receive mode, listening to signals that didn't belong to Mossad's command net. Someone had hijacked their receiver circuits and swapped the active frequency set. That wasn't Hezbollah's work. Their tech capability wasn't that sophisticated. Even with cloning, they couldn't rewrite encryption hardware on site. It had to be coming from someone with precision manufacturing access. He ran the signal origin trace manually. The reflection pointed back south, across the border, terminating through an Israeli test frequency last used by the contractor who produced the initial batch of hardware. The realization felt like a slow blade sliding beneath the ribs. It wasn't only Hezbollah's detection that compromised the network. It was leakage from within. Some supplier, a subcontractor, maybe even a handler, had misused the diagnostic frequency for third-party testing. Every ping from inside Israel had mirrored into Lebanon's spectrum. The enemy didn't crack the network. They were invited in by noise from home. Yaren sat frozen at the console, staring at his own country's fingerprints on the map of compromise. Before confronting Oren, he checked the official operations drive. The supplier access logs were sealed, marked red with the emblem of oversight. That meant internal investigation already existed. Headquarters knew someone had misused the diagnostic band, but no one outside the inner circle was told. That explained the sudden freeze, the vague instructions, the silence that followed every data burst. The reframe was brutal in its simplicity. Hezbollah hadn't discovered the flaw first. Mossad had, and kept it hidden, gambling that exposure would come too late to matter. They were operating with known compromise. Yaron's entire understanding of the mission upended. Every sleepless night, every anxious warning. Not ignored, but buried. The engineers were never trusted to see the full risk because leadership considered that manageable collateral in the chessboard of intelligence. He felt sick. The cost he had feared, personal accountability, was already built into the plan. If the operation failed, the engineers would bear the blame for technical faults. No one would ever reveal that the breach began on Israeli soil. He stormed into Oren's office near dawn, air thick with exhaustion. "You knew," he said. "You knew about the internal bleed." Oren didn't deny it. "Yes," he said simply. "We had a leak. We chose to proceed, because even compromised, it's still effective. They can't decode fast enough." "They don't have to decode," Yaron shot back. "They just need to listen. They already are." Oren stood, his tone suddenly harder. "We've passed the point of reversal. If we abort now, they know what we intended. If we go silent, they still know. Only execution gives us control. Control. This is how you buy unpredictability," Oren said. "They think they're tracking us. Let them. Every second they spend decoding, they're staring at ghosts." Yaron stared, speechless. Ghosts, he thought. That's what he and his team had become, bait for illusions. Outside, dawn light touched the hills. Somewhere beyond that horizon, 3,000 small devices waited for a command that might never come, each one tethered to foreign noise and domestic deceit. Neither man spoke again. Yaron walked out of the operations wing, the echo of his footsteps crossing the tile like quiet gunfire. For the first time, he wondered if the real danger wasn't whether the devices would explode, but whether, when they did, anyone left in the chain would still know which side of the border caused it. The order didn't come as a command. It came as a silence, the kind that ripples down cables and across screens until everyone realizes something irreversible has already begun. At 11:42 a.m., the master frequency cached itself into live mode. The control console in the operations wing flickered once, then settled into armed display. No one spoke. 3,000 devices across Lebanon now sat within one breath of activation. Yaron hesitated, fingers trembling above the input pad. This wasn't how it was supposed to start. There was supposed to be a countdown, a green light from command, a final cross-check. Instead, the system armed itself, automatically. He looked at Oren. Who authorized live mode? No one authorized it, Oren said flatly. It's the redundancy script. Triggers if signal integrity drops below threshold. Signal integrity? That's, Yaron stopped. He realized the mirrored echoes from before the false telemetry. The system was interpreting them as corruption. So the defense code had overridden manual control. They were seconds away from autonomous detonation. Oren ordered his technicians to halt signal acquisition and decouple the transmitter link, but the broadcast buffer was already filling. Every attempt to interrupt only queued another command line on top. Abort, Yaron thought. Just abort. Except abort functions didn't exist anymore. Headquarters had disabled them after the leak. On paper, this made sense. Prevent an enemy from sending false abort codes. In practice, it meant there was no fail-safe left. The team argued over microseconds, or whether to power down the lattice generator or force a static pulse to jam the frequency. One option risked overheating the transmitters, setting off local explosions. The other risked full exposure if Hezbollah picked up the burst. No option saved both. Yaron leaned closer to the console, the buffer queue's building faster than it should. It's not just local loops, he said. Someone's injecting extra lines. Too calm, too analytical, he realized, as though naming the problem would keep it from happening. Oren's jaw locked. Could it be a backdoor from the supplier? Yes, but it's mirroring our own base frequency. We'd have to, Yaron broke off. The code signature was Israeli, not Hezbollah, not a foreign intrusion. Their own network's diagnostic beacon, the same one that had compromised the system in Phase 2, was now feeding test instructions into the live detonation buffer. Every signal they were trying to block was also being transmitted, amplified, repeated by their own network. It meant the operation might trigger and fail simultaneously. Oren stood rigid, every muscle under control of habit alone. We ride it, he said. We stabilize the payload, we trigger manually before the bleed overloads. Yaron stared at him. Ride it? We don't know what's queued inside there. Doesn't matter, Oren said. We lose the window otherwise. Activate by manual relay, not script protocol. This was the first false start. Yaren synced local field channels, toggled synchronization on pulse channels Alpha through Delta, each representing roughly 25% of the devices. He muted his own hesitation and entered the launch handshake. The first signal left the compound, racing invisibly across the air. Tension froze everyone. 5 seconds. 10. No confirmation pings. The system stayed silent. Failure. For an instant, relief washed through Yaron. The false release. Maybe the compromised network had blocked transmission. Maybe nothing would detonate. Maybe the pagers would just remain dead weight, memories of an operation that almost happened. Then, 6 green lights blinked. Sector 4, remote hillside south of Sidon. Echo pulses came back in distorted succession. 3, 5, 17. Incomplete but alive. Meaning partial activation. Too few for mass detonation. Too many to dismiss. They waited for sound reports. There were none. No explosions. No chatter. No satellite heat bloom. The pagers weren't detonating. They were entering thermal charge mode. The power cells had armed but hadn't discharged. "What does that mean?" Oren asked. "They're live but inert," Yaren said. "They'll sit at detonation threshold until the final trigger hits." "How long can they hold?" "Hours. Maybe minutes. Depends on ambient interference." They both knew Lebanon's southern grid was unstable. One blackout surge, one static discharge, and the pagers would detonate independent of command. A phone line buzzed behind them, a secure link from headquarters. An operations director's voice came through, disembodied and calm. "We have satellite confirmation of field heat. Execute final trigger now." Yaren's had snapped toward Oren. "They don't know we're corrupted." "They don't need to," Oren replied. "There's a bleed." I said, "Execute." Yaren's hands hovered over the manual detonation key, but his screen blinked again. New telemetry. The ghost pagers from Sector 9 had returned. Their readings were erratic, broadcasting small bursts not to Mossad's control tower but to each other. "They're cross-talking," he murmured, horrified. Oren frowned. "Meaning?" "They're repeating the activation sequence internally. The pagers are running a relay protocol. They'll trigger themselves once reached by an infected neighbor. If we push full detonation now, they'll chain react?" "Yes," Yaron said. "But across unknown timing. Won't be synchronized, it'll cascade." Oren turned cold eyes on him. "You built them with internal repeaters. They were meant for signal redundancy, not self-trigger." The room quivered with too many voices speaking at once. Technicians argued about a sweepback, radiation spikes, command frequency offsets. The mounting chaos blurred into background noise as Yaren locked onto a single decision point. If he didn't act, the buffer overflow could randomize the signal and blanket the region unpredictably. If he acted, the cascade could trigger uneven detonations, which might produce a slower but wider pattern of destruction. Too many dead, too much data exposed. Abort, it had to be abort. He accessed the lowest level safety, the one designed to sever network relay power and isolate the transmitters inside Israel from those in Lebanon. The code blinked amber, asking for dual authorization. "Oren, I need your key." "No. Oren, we can't control the spread. It doesn't matter anymore," Oren said, a voice like stone. "If we abort, they trace it back. If we let it burn, they lose communication capacity for years. But not instantly," Yaren said, "not cleanly. You'll kill innocents with their eyes open, Oren. Watching." Oren's silence was answer enough. The air filled with hum from the channel generator. A white light crawled across the console, tracing signal burst synchronization. Yaron looked at the map forming on screen. It wasn't random, it was a pulse ladder. Lebanon's coastline lighting up node by node. The network had already decided. It was executing its corrupted code, splitting command authority between Mossad's line and the hijacked Israeli diagnostic feed. Both believed they were primary. Both were broadcasting go instructions. He understood suddenly how fragile everything was. 2 identical signals, 1 operation, no control. Inside that realization came the near abort. He reached for the emergency breaker under the console, not a software command but a physical fuse block. Pulling it would end the network. His career, the mission, maybe his life, but it would stop the bleed. His fingers wrapped around the lever. Then Oren's hand covered his wrist. "Not yet," Oren whispered. "No force, just pressure. Wait until the signal stabilizes." The signal would never stabilize, Yaren knew that. But in that instant, fatigue made him believe Oren just might be right. A false calm settled over him, a breath-long illusion that maybe the system would self-correct, maybe software would filter the noise. He released the lever. 5 heartbeats later, the console erupted in light. Every indicator lit red, then green, then static gray. The chain reaction had begun. Time fractured into fragments. Telemetry flooding back at impossible speed. Sectors 5 and 8 reporting sequential thermal surges. Civilians on the periphery transmitting fragmented distress beacons. Background buzz bleeding into Mossad's monitors. No one in the room spoke. Every breath waited for sound to follow the data. Minutes dragged. Still no detonations. Still silence. Yaron started to wonder if the cascade had failed again, another false start. Then a burst of pure static ripped through the speakers. Not the boom of explosion. Just data, echo upon echo, louder, faster, until screens flickered into white noise. The system was consuming itself. Every frequency collapsing into saturation. Oren looked at him with a hollow expression. "What did you do?" Yaren didn't answer. He checked the thermal heat maps instead. Sector 9, the ghost units, were the epicenter now, broadcasting a silent signal that drowned out the others. The pagers weren't detonating yet. They were overriding commands, blanketing the regional net in deaf audio like a massive jammer. "They're not exploding," Yaren said softly. "Then what are they doing?" He looked up at the flickering lights, the chaos of meaningless echoes bouncing between machine and man, and realized the answer was worse than explosion. "They're listening," he said. "They've turned into receivers." Another blast of static filled the room, rhythm repeating, growing louder with each cycle. Somewhere out of sight, inside Lebanon, thousands of small screens blinked in unison. Waiting, learning, echoing. And Yaren could no longer tell which signal belonged to Mossad, or which one was answering back. The explosions didn't come all at once. They pulsed, slow, irregular, erratic, echoing across Lebanon like the aftershocks of a silent earthquake. Some triggered hours apart, others seconds apart, as if time itself fractured between each detonation. In the operations room, monitors flared with disjointed telemetry. The network hadn't died. It convulsed, thrashing through fragmented commands, replaying activation loops that no longer obeyed their source. Yaren sat frozen before the chaos he had built, feeling the data collapse into noise. No one could tell which bursts were real and which were phantom. Hezbollah's field communications disintegrated immediately, their encrypted channels drowned by the same ghost signals that preceded explosion points. Ambulance radio bands spilled gibberish. Civilian rescue frequencies jammed. Lebanon's southern grid flickered under the electromagnetic overload, but the devastation came paired with confusion. Even within Israeli command, feeds didn't align. Some analysts reported total success, 3,000 silent detonations puncturing Hezbollah's comms web. Others screamed that control was gone, meltdown uncontrolled, footprints traceable. The truth sat somewhere between both, a disaster disguised as victory. Oren leaned against the cold wall, exhaustion carving shadows beneath his eyes. The static from the remaining terminals filled the air like a mechanical storm. "It's over," one officer muttered. "No," Yaron said. "It's not, because it wasn't." Even as explosions rippled through the map, dozens of pagers refused to die. They stayed alive, broadcasting faint signature traces, not outward, but back toward Israel's own frequencies. Reverse telemetry. Someone, or something, was collecting, feeding the operation's own shadows back home. "Kill the receivers," Yaren said. "Sever the diagnostic feed." But Israel's internal servers were already reacting. The bleed from the contractor's network, the flaw buried in Phase 2, had reawakened. The same diagnostic echo that armed the mission now performed its own autopsy. Every data packet transmitted from the field contained residue markers, the checksum fingerprints Yaren wrote months earlier, mapping directly to the engineering division. Within minutes, Internal surveillance logs tagged the live frequencies as cross-contaminated Israeli traffic. The operation was burning traces straight into government infrastructure. The Purge command came down without debate. Headquarters ordered every local archive and network hub erased. Not encrypted, erased. Oren executed the deletion himself. The act took less than a minute. In that blink, months of logs, proofs, and context vanished. Technically, the mission now existed only in rumor. Strategically, it had achieved what it set out to do: disorient Hezbollah's command structure. But institutionally, it had crossed a line. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was disorientation. No one could confirm whether they'd won anything resembling control. The last visuals before a satellite feed failure showed black plumes scattered across highway stretches in southern Lebanon. Indistinct, unclassifiable. By the time the operational window expired, Lebanon's southern comms grid lay crippled. Hezbollah units reverted to human couriers and analog radios, but they weren't shouting over the loss. They were listening, collecting debris, studying what remained of the pagers that didn't detonate. And somewhere inside that wreckage lay the cost. Weeks later, Hezbollah's propaganda channels released a statement. Unknown foreign interference had caused local communication failures. They never named Israel. They didn't have to. The undertone was clear. They were adapting, not collapsing. Open-source analysts posted photographs of half-melted pager frames, identical down to component layout. The images made their way to digital forums, and within hours, independent cybersecurity researchers identified traces of a specific capacitor architecture used only by two firms. One was the Swiss contractor Mossad had masked behind. The other was located in Haifa. Israel's intelligence directorate saw the risk immediately. Attribution precision. One technical fingerprint from an engineer who hadn't meant to leave one. They ordered total blackout, deny involvement, deflect to rival actors, bury oversight reports. But digital networks remember what people attempt to forget. Within months, variations of those device schematics began surfacing across illicit arms and surveillance circles. Reverse engineered, repurposed, sold as instant sabotage systems. Iran acquired a batch. Syrian cells bought templates. China quietly requested consultation through third-country intermediaries. In trying to erase Hezbollah's communications backbone, Mossad had accidentally commercialized the technology for remote, networked detonation. Every covert service now knew Israel could do it, and therefore, so could they. Inside the agency, the afterburn of suspicion spread. The leak investigation widened. Contractors vanished from rosters. Yaron's security clearance evaporated overnight. He wasn't arrested, that would admit fault, but he was made invisible. Assigned to a non-existent department, his name scrubbed from internal emails. He understood the subtext. Someone had to absorb technical responsibility without igniting political fallout. His encryption flaw, his checksum pattern, perfect scapegoats for an operation already rewriting itself through silence. In briefings that followed, Oren presented the mission as operationally conclusive, but with residual anomalies. Clean phrasing that hid the truth, partial success bought through digital collapse. He received commendation in private, reprimand in shadow, and a posting in Europe soon after. The agency called it reallocation. He knew it meant quarantine. Yaron stopped watching the news. Every report on post-operation chaos felt like an autopsy on something he had once built, believing it would save lives through precision. Instead, it had leveled precision into ambiguity, killing by algorithmic misunderstanding more than design. Late nights, he logged into restricted echoes of the old system, searching the archived diagnostic channels that weren't fully erased. Some still pinged faintly from unaccounted pagers. The devices had gone underground, joining the network debris Hezbollah never disclosed. They were still there, dormant, half alive, his creation surviving past its purpose. He realized then what Oren had meant by ride it. In intelligence, the line between success and catastrophe was just time, who declared outcome first. But Yaron kept hearing the static even in sleep. Sometimes he dreamt of pulling the breaker he hadn't pulled, stopping the chain before it crossed the borderlines of intent. Other nights, he imagined the residual pagers still whispering, layered beneath military transmissions. no longer weapons, just memory machines repeating an unfinished command. Inside Mossad headquarters, the operations files remained locked under a vague title, Signal Interference, July 2024. Classified as neither a win nor failure. Budget allocation unchanged, lessons unspoken. The silence had become policy. The 3,000 pagers no longer existed. But their signal did, in research journals, defense budgets, third-party contracts. Every nation that studied that afternoon's blackout drew one conclusion. Synchronized control is an illusion, and in chasing it, even the most precise service can detonate its own shadow. Hidden ops. Every success leaves a frequency. Some still haven't stopped transmitting.